Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 435 of CryptoBiography, and I'm calling this one Political Catch Up. So, early on in CryptoBiography, I think it was episode 67 or 68, 69, somewhere in there, is where I started doing the fiction. Before that, I was like talking with people as often as I could, and because it's, as a new podcast and one that didn't have a huge audience to sort of like automatically gather people unto its bosom, so to speak. I had a lot of episodes where I just talked about myself or talked about something else or did other things. So one of them was sort of like talking about my political history slash views. And it's been a while. And in the meantime, I did try to write this week. However, I had some issues. I had like one story that sort of went somewhere and then it just immediately fell apart. And then, anyway, not worth going into. I will, continue to try to do some writing. I did enjoy the Thing one from last week, and I was trying to do some more sort of horror-based stories, but I didn't come across a good one this time. We will continue to try, especially, since this is still October. In any case, so I thought I would just go ahead and do an update on sort of my political thoughts, since that sort of evolved a fair bit since a few years ago when I started the podcast. And that would have been like in the first year of the podcast sometime. And so to give a little recap, I grew up with a mom who's a Democrat, dad who was Republican. And instead of sort of choosing sides, I sort of ended up splitting the difference. So, and at the time, you could actually say this was libertarian, because at the time this was like an honest libertarian take, and that was small government on both sides. So small government on the social side from the Democrats, small government on the business side from the Republicans, and that sort of thing. And over the years, I never really moved away from that for a long time. However, the Libertarian Party moved away from that over the years and got like worse and worse. And eventually, it was like I found myself sort of holding my nose to vote for them. And then right now, I'm still just voting Democrat, but I'm not really happy voting for the lesser of two evils. Especially since the Democrats have continually sort of ratcheted things to the right, instead of like actually fighting back and being a party that would actually fight against conservatism. They are essentially conservative themselves, just slightly less so. And that's not good. When it comes to my original sort of thoughts about, small government and, on both sides, that's it's a bit naive, but more to the point, it's a sort of political thought that only works in very small, like non-powerful areas. So I think you could get away with like a small government, sort of libertarian, just sort of like mostly leave people alone sort of thing, but only in very small, sort of situations. Because as soon as you have any sort of power that's sort of floating around, I think history does show that you can't, power is going to want more to, gather more power to itself. So that doesn't really work too well. And I would say that of the two, the social part makes a lot of sense as far as small government, but the business part does not. And of course, I've always loathed the sort of like heavy government hand in terms of social things that conservatives have always believed in and do even more now today. Quite disgusting. That was actually part of, like why I didn't become, wasn't interested at all in becoming a Republican. Like if someone had said, well, I'm not going to allow you to become libertarian, you've got to become Democrat or Republican, I would have ended up being a Democrat because I found that to be a lot less disgusting. But anyway, the Democrats are very conservative nowadays. They keep ratcheting. Basically, they've allowed themselves to be like this sort of ratchet party. So every time they get in power, they sort of like Okay, I'm gonna try to do this on my on my webcam. So let's see, that's over on the right. Okay, so this is to the right. So I'm having to do this backwards. So like the Republicans move to the right a little bit, and then the Democrats, instead of like for doing this, so that they're forced to so they're forced to at least kind of make the Republicans come back the other way. They just sort of say, well, we're gonna meet you in the middle, and then they just sort of move towards the Republicans, and then the Republicans move further right, and then the Democrats just move a little bit closer to them. And yeah, Democrats today are, and I think rightfully, have been pointed out by many people to be essentially right or at or right of Republicans in, say, the 1980s and in like the Reagan era. Yeah, there's not even a centrist party anymore. We have two right wing parties in the U.S. in power. We have a right wing government completely, and it's just been getting worse and worse and worse. So why am I sort of going on about this? Well, this weekend was No Kings 2. And I participated in No Kings 1. That was back in July. And I think, when there's, hundreds of demonstrations across the country, the numbers are always going to be a little hard to pin down. But apparently it was like something like 13 million last time. This time it seems to be about 9 million, something like that. I did not take part in this one. The reason I didn't is, there's a couple like local factors as well, because my local one, instead of being on the main road, where like a lot of people drive all the time, it's like this main artery through the little town that we live in, and it also happens to be right where near where I live. It got moved like up into the hills, and granted, there was like a Safeway there that was sort of like the locus, but it's like really, it's sort of like in the suburbia area, and it's like, anyway, I didn't even know that area. I don't go up there. There's no reason for me to go up there. So, anyway, but that wasn't really the reason. Like the fact that it was kind of more annoying to get to and from, and I wouldn't know, and I'd have to figure out where everything was not really a big deal. It was certainly not an actual obstacle or anything. But really, I didn't participate because when it was like the days leading up to it, it was like, why is this happening again? Like, things have gotten significantly worse, actually. The No Kings 1 in July was fine, and got a lot of headlines and got a lot of people mobilized, and not mobilized, but at least out of their houses and meeting their neighbors and stuff like that. It certainly happened with me and my son. He joined me for that one, and so there's definitely some good things happening there, but just No Kings is like, we get it, because Trump has basically been seizing more and more power, and both the other two branches of government have basically abdicated. They've basically handed over power to him. The Congress, just because there's a slight Republican majority, and the Supreme Court, because there are 6 conservative, like disgustingly conservative judges. And they both sort of basically said he can do whatever he wants. He can't be convicted of any crime. He can't be blah, 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 blah. It's like, he basically can't be stopped unless the Republicans, get a backbone. But why would they get a backbone? They're conservative. That just doesn't happen. Plus, they like half of what he's doing anyway. So what are you going to do? Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. But one thing I didn't want to do was participate in No Kings 2, because the more I thought about it, was like, why are we doing this again? Like, the first one was nice, but things have gotten significantly worse just since July. Like Trump has done multiple illegal things since July, like right out in the open. He's taken these huge bribes. He killed those Venezuelan people on that boat with like not even knowing who they were, just sort of killing them and then claiming that they were drug dealers, even though there was, they had absolutely no proof of that. Like he's done multiple violently criminal things. Things have gotten significantly worse with ICE. Things have gotten significantly worse with a lot of other sort of things around the world. Why do No Kings 2 and just leave it there? Like, why set up No Kings 2 with still no demands? Like, okay, the first one I get, like, and I appreciated it, and I actually thought it was, being part of it was kind of interesting and kind of cool, and I got to meet some people, and I learned that there are, in fact, like, people who were doing things politically in the neighborhood, and lots of people, sort of want to stand up against Trump in some way. And all that was great, but doing it again, why? Like, what does that prove, other than the fact that you can get a lot of people together in public again? I guess there might be some value to, like, the idea that, like, if people do political things a couple of times, like more than once, more than just like that once, and be done with it, maybe eventually that leads to something better. But the Democrats are not really pushing back in any serious way. The No Kings Rally 2 had absolutely no demands. It was just to say we don't like Trump and what he's doing, just sort of in general, but there was no demands to actually make him stop or change anything. So it was all peaceful, which is great. Not too surprising, because they weren't actually threatening anything. I mean, the No Kings 2 did what they wanted to. They got a lot of people together, and that's it. They got a lot of people together, and that's really about it. And hopefully, like, I do hope that, like, the people who participated, including, I'm sure that, like, even though I was in one but not in two, I'm sure that the vice versa did happen. There were people who didn't do one but now have done two. And of course, people who have done both, and it was like their first time doing anything political, but now they've done two things. And, maybe that will lead to good things down the road, but I didn't really see the point, and I didn't really want to participate in something that, as far as I could see, the only thing it would potentially change is if it actually did get violent somewhere, and I didn't want to, be a part of that. I don't know, just anyway. So yeah, I mean, I think part of my problem is because of, sometimes you're sort of held back by the path that you took. Humans, we're sort of creatures of our own memory and our own history and stuff. And, when you sort of get into a pattern, it's, figuring, if kind of sort of getting any sort of real perspective on it becomes very difficult. I think if I'm being true to myself, I am left wing. I guess I have to say that, but what that means, I just don't know, because the discourse is so poor in this country about, like, what even consists, what left wing really means, and there's so many. It's been, shattered into so many different versions, and they too often don't help each other, which is kind of crazy. It's yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think what's likely to happen. Here's what's likely to happen, I think, in the future. Things are going to get a lot worse, basically. That's what it comes down to. Trump is going to seize even more power. Whether he actually stays in power past this 4-year period and into a third, which, technically shouldn't be possible. But of course, he's done a lot of other things that are against the Constitution, and no one said anything. But what I think, but more to the point, is whether he's in power or not, things are just going to get a lot worse, because we're not following science at the CDC. We're not following science at the FDA. We're not, we're being completely laissez-faire when it comes to, like, the FAA and the FCC and every other government agency. Many local ones, but of course I'm mostly talking about the federal one at this point. And yeah, what's going to happen is when you get away from science and you get away from like sort of the reality that grounds you, and you sort of live in this sort of la world of, whatever you feel has to be the truth, whether that's, based part of the religion, or it's just part of, woo, pseudoscience or whatever. Things can only get worse, because how are you going to run any sort of medicine on a federal level, and I know we don't have, we don't have, health for everyone, health coverage for everyone, but even the stuff that we do, was very strongly based in medicine and science, and now it is not, and similar for all these other things. And he's also like doing all these tariffs, which every economics person knows is going to lead to horrible things. It's just going to get a lot worse before anything changes, apparently, because things like No Kings 2 they feel great, and I hope that they lead to people doing political stuff down the road, but they don't actually do anything themselves. Like, recently in France, there have been some protests, but what they do is they don't just say, hey, okay, a month out, we're going to have a protest, and that's going to be it, and that's going to be it. They, like, a bunch of people take to the streets, and then that's just the pattern. That's night after night after night after night until something changes, and then things go back to normal. They don't actually stop protesting until something changes. It's the opposite here in the United States. We are doing these one and done protests, and therefore nothing can happen because of them, because what can possibly happen? Even if the right wing, or even if the government or whatever is kind of nervous about the protest because it's going to be so big, and it was, by all measures quite big, all they have to do is sit tight for a few hours and it's done, and that's it. That's that. So I didn't take part in No Kings 2. You can argue that maybe I should have anyway, just to sort of add to the numbers, and maybe I would have met some people who would have helped me, would have been good to meet up with politically, but I just did not want to do it in the end. And I don't denigrate those who did do it, and I do think it was potentially a good thing. I just don't think it did anything by itself. So, one other thing that I've sort of noticed over the years is the right wing, especially, but remember, Democrats are also right wing. They're just a little bit less right wing. But especially the Republicans, they are very much, of the idea that rules apply one way for one group of people and another way for another group of people. So that means one set of rules for the rich, another for the poor, one set of rules for politicians, another for non-politicians, one set of rules for companies, one set of rules for non-companies, one set of rules for Christian religious people, another set of rules for non-religious and non-Christian people. And, you could see that all the way. You could see that, you can go back all the way. For me, the time that I sort of really recognized it, because remember, I was sort of outside of that, because I considered myself libertarian, even though the Libertarian Party was kind of going off the rails by the time of the 90s, because this is the time I'm going to be talking about. But I was sort of outside of that, so I wasn't really rooting for either side. So one thing, what happened when Clinton got impeached over the Lewinsky affair was I was sort of cautiously optimistic about it, actually. I recognized that this was sort of setting a strict standard of conduct. But to me, that's a good thing. If you actually do that for everyone, that's actually a good thing. Yeah, people should not, be, because you have, a president has power over the people who work for him. And, so when you do something like that, then you're essentially it's an abuse of power. And I was all for sort of setting strict standards on presidential conduct. I didn't think he should be removed from power. I thought that would have been a little much for this sort of thing, but I did think that he should have been impeached, and I was okay with that part. And I don't know, what sort of punishment there you can do if you're not going to remove him from power. But anyway, that's sort of like a whole other deal, because of the American system is sort of weird that way. But then it became clear that the Republicans they didn't want a strict set of ethical standards, and they just wanted to stick it to a Democratic president. And as soon as things started happening where Republican presidents were doing things that were unethical, they were just more than happy to look the other way, to the point now that it's gone all the way to where the Supreme Court now says that basically a president can essentially not do anything illegal. And if he does do anything illegal, you can't hold him to account for it. Only the impeachment process can do that. And of course, unless you have like a really hefty majority, good luck. Especially with, Republicans sort of backing Republicans come hell or high water. So anyway, so in the end, I guess I'm a little, I'm happy that No Kings 2 went well. I'm happy that it was nonviolent. I think if it had gone violent, like if some right wingers had, instigated some things, and then, maybe the National Guard got called in or whatever, and things went really shitty in one city or another, or even multiple cities. I don't think that would have been much of a help, and I don't think it would have led to much real change or anything like that. So I'm just glad it went off peacefully. And I do hope that it helped some people find other people in their neighborhoods or in their areas or whatever that will help them become more political. Or maybe they saw some of the bigger cities. There were like speakers and stuff. That doesn't happen in like the little local ones usually, at least not in my experience. Like the two that I sort of had familiarity with, because I participated in one and sort of passed the other one as well. There's no speakers. There's just people holding up signs and stuff. But maybe they sort of saw the light and like it's like, okay, yeah, now I got to get political. I hope that happens. I hope that happened, and potentially it could have happened hundreds of thousands, even millions of times, and that would be great. Yeah, but I'm still a little at sea, because like I still come from this weird thing of like sort of being outside the Republican versus Democrat thing. But I think that's kind of helping me in a way too, because I sort of see the Democrats for what they really are. It's like they're sort of the nicer face of conservatism. Like they're still very conservative, but they try to do some things socially that sort of are a little more inclusive and blah, blah, blah. But really, they're not much of an improvement. I guess I'm left wing, but I just don't know what that means. That's, should I be considered myself any specific type of leftism? I don't know, anarchist or communist or socialist or social democrat. I don't know. And I don't even know if social democrat is really all that left wing, but whatever. At least it would be, it'd be definitely a big step away from where we are with the Democrats. Anyway, I don't know so that's where I am. I'm very confused. I do hope that if there's another big, No Kings type rally set up, that they actually do something with it. Like it's not one and done. It's not, hey, we're going to do this one thing in a month, and we're not going to make any demands, and we're not going to, everything is going to be just sign waving and that's it. I hope that a large protest that actually is trying to do something happens soon, because things are getting pretty bad, and like I say, things are going to get a lot worse in the United States, with the president just sort of putting up tariffs willy-nilly, all kinds of crazy power in the hands of ICE, all kinds of other crazy things happening, both directly through Trump and also through his really horrific, leaders of like every little branch of the federal government is led by an insane person right now. It's absolutely wild. There's no way that even a country as powerful and as well sort of entrenched in power and has all these advantages because of it, because of these decades of being very powerful and having power and exercising power legally and illegally and all that sort of thing. And all these advantages cannot survive destroying itself from within like this. It just won't happen. So things are going to get bad. They're already bad, and we're less than a year into his current term. And maybe that's the only way that things will really change. It's quite possible. Anyway, I hope you're having a better weekend than I am. I don't know why I do know why I'm doing this, but it's a little difficult for me to do it. Anyway, I hope things are going well for you. I am going to still try to write. Like I said, I tried some writing, and I just wasn't able to get a story together. This was sort of an interesting weekend for me because of what was happening, and really the 2 days up to the Saturday event of No Kings 2, I was really back and forth. I was really arguing with myself whether I should be doing it, whether I shouldn't. What does it mean? Should I be doing it regardless of some of these doubts that I have, and just sort of put myself in there as well? Maybe that would do some good, but then maybe it wouldn't. It's been a whole weekend for me. I was probably, I guess you could say I was overthinking it. But anyway, I hope you have a good weekend. I hope if you took part in No Kings 2 that it helped you, that you got to see some people around you who are doing the same, who have some of the same feelings you have. Maybe you met some people who you can sort of actually do something political with. And anyway, have a good one. If you have any comments about or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or on Blue Sky. And thanks for listening. Words of Music, copyright 2025, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. And not that it matters this time, but characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.